care greatly if you go left, if you go right, as long as it makes sense what you're doing and you turn out to be an effective legislature and listen.
Right.
And so, I was an independent for 31 years. I became a Democrat because I wanted, after my daughter's health care, to work in health care, and I thought that was the best opportunity.
Right.
And I believe they came closest to trying to have both of those two tenets. One party certainly is about, as Senator Toomey is, you're on your own. So he could say, I care about Alzheimer's and want to increase funding in it, as he has said 6 times around the state. But he's voted against the NIH funding of $400 million each year for Alzheimer's, and the bipartisan amendment of $122 million that passed, he voted against. So there's an issue of trust. He says one thing, does another, but there's also this, you're on your own. As I mentioned out there, he not only voted to send me to war as a congressman, but he actually visited my aircraft carriers when we were doing the strikes. Told the sailors they were doing great, but he came home and voted against 12 straight Veterans Administration appropriations bills. Now, he might have a reason he did that, but he shouldn't then come up to Delaware County or other counties and say we have a backlog of claims when he voted against the bill that actually had an increase in claims, in claim processors. As I mentioned out there, he said the suicide rate is too high for our veterans, but voted against the standalone bill, never mind the Veterans Appropriations Bill, that was more TBI and PTSD. Nor should he say we have the homeless rate is too high for our veterans here in America, in Pennsylvania, and go to Washington and vote against the HUD-VASH bill program that actually helps us. It's okay if that's what he feels, you're on your own, but he shouldn't tell us up here he's concerned about or human trafficking, as I mentioned up there in Bucks County, where he met with an editorial board all and said, we've got to do something about this scourge, because Bucks County is the corridor where many of the 50,000 girls who are brought in as sex slaves every year from outside are. But then he's voted down to defund 3 times the office of the Attorney General's office on human trafficking. And so the other part of that, at times, the other party goes way over here. And it's all about the common good and the common weal, and the government can do it all. I don't believe that. I believe the government does have a legitimate role in furthering our lives. As Republican President Eisenhower had the Stafford Loan Program passed, basically, called the National Defense Loan Program, and that's what it is today, or he built the Interstate Highway, or President Nixon established the EPA.
Right. And
they kind of got that balance. But I think the parties are like this, and it should be the proper alignment of the two.
So, I guess I'm not asking you to pinpoint when it happened, but why, as you mentioned, that you think that people should disagree, but that doesn't mean it should lead to divisiveness, that was the word used. So,
like Senator McConnell and Senator Reid, if you ever watched them there, it's harsh and divisive. It's not a debate of ideas about, well, you voted this way and I don't agree for this reason. You know, to me, that's okay. I don't agree with you for voting against the Veterans Appropriations Bills, because the veterans do deserve to come home. And you should be saying you care if you don't, but that's different than making it personal or making it about something that's not even about, you know, what Americans care about.
So how do we get out, change that? I mean, it's.
I think politics has always been harsh, but I think there's 2 ways. One is, I think I have to practice what I say. And if you go back and look at any of my comments, I think you'd be hard pressed to find one where I put down at all Republicans. Mine was a Republican district. I may disagree with the public leadership of where they've gone astray, but my district was 55, 56% Republican, 30% Democrat. My first race, I raised $3.5 million to win, because it was a 22-year incumbent. My second race, I raised $3.5, but I spent $28,000 to win, because they came, our office open 7 days a week. If you had a problem, you'd come in. We handled 4 times the constituent cases as the average judicial officer. So one way is true service. I don't say that lightly. I had 12 bills passed, 12 pieces of legislation passed in my first 2 years as a freshman congressman. So Steny Hoyer, the majority leader, says you were the most productive freshman congressman. He made an announcement. But it was more than either senator of Pennsylvania or congressman of Pennsylvania passed. But they were done on things that I think you can do a principal compromise on. Small business, autism, the first movement of money into autism in 12 years. Elder abuse, as you know, we have about a 35% increase every year of elder abuse in Pennsylvania. It's the hidden illness. I found out about it when Wachovia Bank was knew that $23 million money had been stolen from seniors by payday scammers and all, and was letting it happen until we went to court to make them do restitution. I had a senior beat with a belt buckle twice. Who had dementia was stolen $40,000 out of it. So I passed the Elder Abuse Act with a Republican. Or I teamed up with a Republican legislature who was an occupational therapist, and when our vets were coming home, we had a 12% shortage of occupational, physical, speech pathologists and audiologists, both for autism and for vets. And so teaming with him, we now had in law that if you fill this, it's called a national need, it's more than 10%, you could have $10,000 deducted from your tuition if you'll go in, stay in that field. So that's why I had 12 things done, but it was done in that way, plus it serves. The second way is, the Senate has changed tremendously. You can have a 2-year senator become president, or a 2-year senator have a bully puppet almost equal to the president. I tell Democrats, look what Rubio, Cruz, and Rand have done. They've only been there 2 years, but they have an equal bully puppet to the others. So where are the lions that roar on the other side, in a sense? But I don't mean roar to put down the other side. If I hear, everything the first couple of years from Senator Toomey was always Obama, or this. It's Obama war on coal, it's this. Isn't it, you heard me say out there, natural gas has put coal, because it's equal in price and less. So in a sense, I think you can have a bully puppet, as a good captain of a ship would do, and set a way that you debate the issues. Now, it doesn't mean you don't go down there and say, I disagree that not having support for alternative energy is wrong, but you present it in a way that we wouldn't have fracking today, as I mentioned out there, if the Navy hadn't developed the sonar used by our frackers, Right. And I think those are the two ways. Can I say I could change it all myself? No. But if you go, I was in a Republican district, my second race, $28,000 I spent, and I won it against Senator Toomey by, I think it was 12 or 13. So my take is that it can be done.
Talk a little bit.
And I think it has to be done, because America's going nowhere right now in the United States Senate.
So
look at that letter to Iran.
Right. So do people, when you're out, right, and I guess that's something, and I don't know if I want to spend too much time on that, but I mean, the climate now, I don't know if you would have seen that even 5 years ago, that, 10, I mean, going back decades, I don't think you would have seen senators send a letter like that. I guess that's kind of the question, that how did we get to this point? It has. I think you're right. I mean, it's going to take a lot of effort on both sides to change that climate. But talk a little bit more about.
The major reason I want to run is I want the people's trust. But part of it is by being that way. Look, it's the United States ship of state. But sometimes you can take over as a ship that probably is a little bit down compared to other ships. All you need is 2 or 3 good leaders in there, a good chief petty officer, a good executive officer, a decent captain, and soon people start setting up. Doesn't mean you're still not going to have it, but I can remember when John McCain would call during the race, and because we were fellow naval officers, and that's part of the reason I'm able to, I think, it's like the guy who came out of the car dealership the other day. Hey, I'm a Republican, but I really like what you're doing. There isn't this assumption that all of a sudden this guy is just anti. Maybe he's a Democrat, but willing to see if he can do a principal compromise. But I remember he called one time and said, Joe, sorry on television, it's still too long. Keep it short. Clang. I mean, that bodes something. And John McCain was once a man who was noted for being, quote, a renegade for reaching apart. And so I think this independence like I talked about, the youth are gonna be valuable, is also needed to where, in our parties, to where, as John F. Kennedy once said, sometimes the party asks too much. And when I announced, I said, it's not about type. I don't believe in type, I don't believe in party, I believe in we the people. So, and I do.
I don't know if I want to go down this path too much longer, but I mean, the strength that the parties have in the process, I mean, I think if you ask, I mean, my perception as just a regular American is that a lot of senators would like to be able to do more, but they feel like as a member of their party and one of the leading members of their party, the party's also putting a lot of pressure on them to win. I mean, to win everything, you'd be on top. So how do you balance, and you obviously have experience in this, how do you balance your
Yes.
party versus what you believe?
I think if I could rephrase that, how do you balance the party towards what the people need? And I did that against Senator Spector's when the president on down and Governor Mandela, like very much said, it's not Joe's turn. You know, he needs to sit down. And that's why I try to rephrase it towards the people need. They aren't listening to leaderships that have let them down. And therefore, if you ever have a chance to read this great book, James McGregor Burns' Leadership, it talks about why parties eventually forget their primary purpose. If you look at unions and look at the AFL-CIO charter that opens it up, talks about they're not established for unions. They're established for working families. The Democratic Party, as I've said in these many hundreds of events, is only of value if it's coalesced around those two tenets of rugged individualism and good. So to some degree,